The day I found out my husband had been cheating wasn't the worst day of my life. The worst day came 3 weeks later, when his own daughter stood outside my front door holding a worn cardboard box against her chest. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped it before I reached for her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't keep lying to you anymore." Inside the box were hotel receipts, printed emails, screenshots of text messages, and a silver bracelet I had given my husband on our 15th wedding anniversary. He told me he lost it during a business trip. He hadn't lost it. He had simply taken it off before meeting another woman. I stared at the bracelet until everything around me became blurry. For 17 years, I believed I knew exactly who my husband was. Turns out, I only knew the version he wanted me to see. My name is Emily, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a marriage most people envied. My husband, Daniel, wasn't flashy. He wasn't overly romantic either, but he was dependable. At least, that's what everyone, including me, believed. He always paid the bills on time. He never forgot birthdays. He called if he was running late. He hugged me every morning before leaving for work. Looking back now, I realized something heartbreaking. Consistency can hide secrets just as well as chaos. We met when I was 28. I worked as a nurse at the local hospital. Daniel managed operations for a construction company. He had been divorced for 2 years and was raising his 12-year-old daughter, Lily, every other week. I had never dated someone with a child before, but Lily changed that fear almost immediately. She was quiet, polite, and incredibly mature for her age. The first time we met, she handed me a homemade bookmark because Daniel had told her I loved reading. "I hope you like it," she'd said shyly. I still kept that bookmark inside my favorite novel. Or at least I did until recently. When Daniel proposed 18 months later, Lily hugged me before I even answered. "I've always wanted a mom," she whispered. I cried harder than Daniel did. Marriage wasn't perfect. No marriage ever is. We argued about money sometimes. He worked long hours. I worked night shifts. Sometimes we'd go days without having dinner together. But we always found our way back. Or so I believed. When Lily left for college, the house became strangely quiet. Daniel joked that we'd finally have time to travel together. We started planning weekend trips. We talked about buying a cabin near a lake after retirement. Those conversations felt real. That's what hurts the most. I don't think every smile was fake. I think he genuinely loved parts of our life. He just loved another life too. The first crack appeared 5 years before everything collapsed. Daniel came home smelling different. Not perfume. Something softer. Vanilla and jasmine. When I asked about it, he laughed. One of the women at work hugged everyone after getting promoted. That sounded reasonable. I didn't question it again. 3 weeks later, he worked late 3 nights in a row. Construction deadlines. Again, believable. Then came another business trip. Then another. Then another. Each explanation made sense by itself. Looking at them one by one, there was never enough evidence to doubt him. Looking back now, they formed a pattern so obvious I can't believe I missed it. People always ask why spouses don't notice affairs sooner. The truth is painfully simple. Trust fills in the blanks. If someone says they're working late, your brain doesn't immediately imagine another woman. It imagines paperwork, traffic, meetings, deadlines. Trust isn't blindness. It's choosing the most innocent explanation because you love someone. Daniel knew that. He used it perfectly. About 4 years ago, I started picking up extra shifts. The hospital was understaffed, and overtime paid well. Daniel encouraged me. "We'll pay off the mortgage years early," he'd say. I thought he was proud of me. Now I wonder if he was simply grateful I wasn't home as often. While I spent 12-hour shifts caring for strangers, he spent evenings somewhere else, building memories with another woman, using the future we planned together as an excuse to disappear. The funny thing about betrayal is that it rarely announces itself. It whispers. Little things. Tiny details. A phone suddenly turned face down. A password quietly changed. Smiles that don't reach the eyes. Conversations that feel rehearsed. You notice them. Then you convince yourself you're imagining them. Because the alternative is terrifying. One Saturday morning, I walked into the kitchen earlier than usual. Daniel was texting someone. The moment he heard my footsteps, he locked his phone. Too quickly. His smile appeared half a second later. Morning. Morning. Something felt off. But I kissed his cheek and started making coffee. Marriage teaches you to ignore moments that don't fit the story you've built together. A month later, Lily came home for Thanksgiving. By then, she was 23 and working as a graphic designer. She had become confident, funny, and independent. Watching her laugh with Daniel during dinner made me feel grateful. He looked like such a loving father. She looked happy too. Yet twice that evening, I caught her staring at him with an expression I couldn't understand. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was guilt. I assumed she'd had a difficult week at work. I never asked. Sometimes I wish I had. Christmas came. Then New Year's. Life kept moving. Daniel bought me a necklace. I bought him a new watch. We hosted family dinners. We smiled for photographs. If someone had told me then that my husband had already been cheating for almost 3 years, I would have laughed. Not because he seemed incapable. Because our ordinary life felt so ordinary. Affairs belonged to dramatic marriages. Not ours. At least that's what I believed. Everything changed one rainy Tuesday afternoon. I left work early because a migraine had become unbearable. When I pulled into the driveway, Daniel's car wasn't there. No surprise. He texted saying he had an afternoon meeting. Inside the house, I swallowed pain medicine and tried to sleep. About an hour later, his tablet buzzed on the coffee table. Normally, I would have ignored it. But the sound kept repeating. Message after message. I picked it up only intending to silence the notifications. Instead, I saw a name I'd never seen before. Claire. The preview read, I already missed this morning. 5 years still isn't enough. My heart stopped. For several seconds, I couldn't even process the words. 5 years. Not 5 weeks. Not 5 months. 5 years. I opened the message. Then another. Then another. Photographs. Vacation selfies. Hotel confirmations. I love you. I can't wait until we're together. I wish you didn't have to go home. My hands started shaking so violently the tablet slipped onto the carpet. I sat frozen on the living room floor. Every memory from the last 5 years replayed inside my head. Every late meeting. Every business trip. Every excuse. Every lie. When Daniel walked through the front door 2 hours later, he smiled exactly the way he always did. Hey, sweetheart. He stopped when he saw the tablet lying on the coffee table. His face lost all color. Neither of us spoke. The silence lasted so long I could hear the ticking clock in the hallway. Finally, he whispered one word. Emily. I looked him straight in the eyes. Who is Claire? For the first time in 17 years. My husband had no answer. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, his briefcase still hanging from his shoulder. For 17 years, I had watched him talk his way through impossible situations. He could calm angry clients, negotiate contracts, and somehow make every problem sound manageable. But that afternoon, he couldn't find a single word. His eyes moved from me to the tablet on the coffee table and back again. I can explain, he finally said. I almost laughed. No, I replied quietly. You can answer one question. Who is Claire? He rubbed both hands across his face. It's complicated. I felt something inside me snap. No, I said, standing up. It's actually very simple. Either she's your coworker, your friend, or she's the woman you've been sleeping with. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. I stared at the man I'd shared a bed with for nearly 2 decades, and suddenly he looked like a complete stranger. The familiar face was still there, but everything behind it had changed. How long? I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than the answer. 5 years. I closed my eyes. The message hadn't been exaggerating. 5 years. 1/3 of our marriage. While we celebrated anniversaries, planned vacations, and talked about growing old together, He'd been building another relationship. I never wanted to hurt you. The words came out so naturally that I wondered how many times he'd practiced them. I looked at him in disbelief. You've had 5 years to stop. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I was going to tell you. When? He didn't answer. Next month? Next year? After retirement? Still nothing. I nodded slowly. Pack a bag, Emily. Pack a bag. He tried walking toward me. I stepped back. Don't. For the first time since I'd met him, I didn't want him anywhere near me. He disappeared upstairs without another word. I stood alone in the living room, listening to drawers open and close above me. 17 years. Reduced to the sound of a suitcase zipper. After he left, the house became unbearably quiet. I expected to cry. Instead, I felt empty. I wandered from room to room without knowing why. Every photograph on the walls suddenly felt like evidence. There was one from our trip to Colorado. Another from Lily's college graduation. Our 15th anniversary dinner. Christmas mornings. Family barbecues. I stared at Daniel's smile in every picture. Had he been thinking about Claire while standing beside me? Had he texted her before kissing me goodnight? Questions multiplied faster than answers. Around midnight, I finally called my younger sister, Rachel. She answered on the second ring. Emily? Is everything okay? I tried to speak. Instead, I burst into tears. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later wearing sweatpants and carrying 2 cups of coffee. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She simply sat beside me until I could breathe again. When I finished telling her everything, she remained silent for a long moment. Finally, she asked, "Do you think this is really over?" "What do you mean? Do you think he's actually ended it with her?" I hadn't even considered that. The thought made me sick. "No," I admitted. Rachel nodded. "Then don't believe anything he says until you see actions." It was practical advice. Painfully practical. The next morning, Daniel texted. "Can we talk?" I ignored it. Another message came an hour later. "I'm so sorry." Then another. "Please don't throw everything away." Everything away? I wasn't the one who had done that. He had. 5 years ago. By the end of the week, friends started calling. Apparently, Daniel had told people we were having a rough patch. A rough patch. Not an affair. Not betrayal. Just marriage problems. I realized he was already protecting his image. That hurt almost as much as the cheating. 3 days later, someone knocked on my front door. I assumed it was Rachel. Instead, I found Lily standing there. She looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, and she'd clearly been crying. Without saying a word, she hugged me. She held on longer than usual. When she finally pulled away, she whispered, "Can I come in?" Of course. We sat at the kitchen table. Neither of us touched the coffee I'd made. She kept twisting a ring around her finger. Finally, she looked up. "I'm so sorry." "You don't have anything to apologize for." "I do." Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. "Lily." She inhaled deeply. "I've known about Claire." The room went silent. I blinked once. Then twice. "I'm sorry, what?" Tears rolled down her face. "I've known for almost 3 years." The words hit harder than I expected. 3 years. She had carried the secret for 3 years. I couldn't understand. "You knew?" She nodded. "I found out by accident." "How?" She wiped her eyes. "I came home early one weekend from college. Dad thought I wasn't arriving until Sunday." She paused. "I walked into a restaurant." Her voice cracked. "And I saw him." My heart sank. He was holding another woman's hand. She looked down at the table. "I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. So I followed them." She covered her face. I watched them kiss. I couldn't speak. I confronted him that night. "What did he say?" "He begged me not to tell you." I closed my eyes. "Of course he did." "He said." She whispered. "He said you were already stressed from work, that your marriage was complicated, that he was going to end it soon, that telling you then would destroy our family." I laughed bitterly. The family he'd already destroyed. She nodded through tears. I know. I wanted to tell you so many times. She looked absolutely devastated. I even drove to your house twice planning to tell you. What stopped you? She looked ashamed. He always convinced me to wait. How? He'd say he was ending it. Then he'd promise counseling. Then he'd promise to confess after Christmas. Then after your anniversary. Then after your birthday. There was always another reason. I realized something horrifying. Daniel hadn't only manipulated me. He'd manipulated his own daughter. I hate myself, Lily whispered. You shouldn't. I lied to you. You were protecting your father. I was protecting the wrong person. She began crying uncontrollably. I moved around the table and hugged her. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly said something I'll never forget. You've always treated me like your own daughter. You never deserved this. When she finally calmed down, she looked at me with determination. There's something else. My chest tightened. What? I brought you something. She walked outside to her car. A minute later, she returned carrying a small cardboard box. The same box she'd been staring at while standing on my porch. She placed it gently on the table. I've been collecting things. What things? Proof. I looked at her in confusion. Every time Dad lied. Every receipt he accidentally left behind. Every hotel reservation. Every birthday card from Claire. Every picture I found. I kept copies. I slowly opened the box. Hotel receipts. Restaurant bills. Printed emails. Photos. A bracelet. My bracelet. The silver bracelet I'd given Daniel years earlier. He said he lost it, I whispered. Lily shook her head. No. She reached into the box and handed me a photograph. Daniel was sitting at an outdoor cafe. Claire was smiling across the table. On his wrist was my anniversary bracelet, like a trophy from the life we'd built together. I covered my mouth to stop myself from screaming. There was one more thing, Lily said softly. She pulled out a sealed envelope. I almost threw this away. Inside was a folded letter, not addressed to me, addressed to Daniel, written by Claire. I unfolded it carefully. The first sentence stole the air from my lungs. I don't want to spend another Christmas pretending I'm not your real partner. I looked at Lily. When was this written? Last December. That meant while Daniel was buying me gifts, smiling in family photos, and kissing me under the mistletoe. His mistress was begging him to leave his wife. My entire holiday had been built on lies. Lily reached across the table and held my hand. I know you'll probably never forgive him. I looked at the box. At the years of deception packed neatly inside. No. My voice was calm now. I won't. She hesitated. But I hope one day. I squeezed her hand before she could finish. You are not your father's mistakes. Fresh tears filled her eyes. I was so scared you'd hate me. I pulled her into another hug. I could never hate you. She wasn't the woman who betrayed me. She was another victim of the same man. That evening, after Lily left, I spread every piece of evidence across the dining room table. The affair wasn't just emotional. It wasn't occasional. It was an entire second life. Vacations. Hotels. Anniversaries. Birthday gifts. Love letters. 5 years of calculated deception. Then, buried beneath the last stack of papers, I found something neither of us had noticed earlier. It was a folded receipt from a jewelry store. Attached to it was a handwritten note. 3 simple words. For our engagement. I checked the date. It was from just 2 weeks ago. My husband hadn't just been cheating. He had been planning to marry another woman. While still married to me. I stared at the jewelry receipt for so long that the numbers began to blur. A diamond ring. Paid in full. 2 weeks ago. Attached to it was Claire's handwritten note. For our engagement. I can't wait until we never have to hide again. I read those words over and over, hoping I had misunderstood them. I hadn't. While he was texting me good morning, kissing my forehead before work, and asking what I wanted for dinner, he had been shopping for an engagement ring with another woman. He wasn't trapped. He wasn't confused. He was making plans. Plans that didn't include me. That night, I barely slept. Every hour I found myself replaying memories, searching for clues I'd missed. 2 weeks ago. That had been the weekend Daniel claimed he was attending a construction conference in another city. I remembered ironing his shirts, packing snacks for the drive, even reminding him to call when he arrived safely. He had. He called around 7 that evening. "I made it," he'd said. "The hotel is nice. I miss you already." I remembered smiling while washing dishes. "I miss you too." Now I wondered if Claire had been standing beside him while he said those words. The thought made me physically sick. The following morning, Rachel came over again. I handed her the receipt without saying anything. She read it once, then looked up at me. "He was going to leave you." I nodded. "I think so." She shook her head. "No. What do you mean?" "He wasn't planning to leave you." I frowned. "He bought the ring." Rachel tapped the receipt. "If he truly wanted to leave, he would have filed for divorce first." Her words settled heavily in the room. He wanted both lives until the last possible moment. Deep down, I knew she was right. Around noon, my phone rang. "Daniel." I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. "Hello." His voice sounded tired. "Thank you." "For what?" "For picking up." I waited. "Can we please meet?" "I don't think there's anything left to discuss." "There is." "No. There really is, Emily." I closed my eyes. This isn't about fixing us. It's about explaining. I deserve that chance. I almost hung up. Then something inside me changed. Not hope. Curiosity. I wanted to hear how someone justified destroying 17 years of marriage. 1 hour, I said. The cafe on Riverside. I'll be there. When I arrived, Daniel was already sitting outside. He looked different. Unshaven. Dark circles under his eyes. His shoulders seemed smaller somehow. For a brief second, I remembered the man I'd once loved. Then I remembered why I was there. I sat down across from him. Neither of us ordered coffee. "You look tired," he said quietly. "I haven't slept." "I know." "No," I interrupted. "You don't." Silence. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry." I laughed without humor. "You've already said that." "I mean it." "I know." "Then why does it sound so empty?" He stared at the table. "I never meant for this to happen." I leaned back in my chair. "I have a question." "Anything." "When did you stop loving me?" His head lifted immediately. "I never stopped." The answer made me angrier than anything else he'd said. "Don't." "It's true. You don't betray someone you love for 5 years." "I loved both of you." The words hung between us. I couldn't believe he'd actually said them aloud. "You loved both of us?" He nodded slowly. "I know it sounds impossible." "No. It sounds selfish." Daniel rubbed his temples. "It started as a friendship. Claire had just gone through a divorce. We worked together on a project. She understood the stress. I understood hers. It wasn't supposed to become anything." I stared at him. "You know what's interesting?" "What?" "Every person who's caught cheating says exactly that." He didn't respond. "At what point," I continued, "did friendship become hotel rooms?" His face reddened. "I don't know. You remember." "No. You just don't want to say it." He looked away. "It happened after a conference." I nodded. "So every conference after that was another lie." He whispered. "Yes." "What about our anniversaries? What about Christmas? My birthdays? Were those lies too?" "No. They were real." I shook my head. "You don't get to call them real. You were living 2 separate lives." "I meant everything I ever said to you." "Then why didn't you stop?" He remained silent. I repeated the question. "Why didn't you stop?" Finally, he answered. "Because every time I tried to leave Claire, I couldn't." I almost smiled. "And every time you thought about leaving me." His silence answered again. "You couldn't do that either." He looked ashamed. I was scared. Of what? Losing everything. I looked directly into his eyes. "And now?" He swallowed hard. "I have." For the first time during the conversation, I believed he was telling the truth. Not because he regretted cheating. because he regretted getting caught. There was a difference. A very important one. I know Lily came to see you. That surprised me. She told you. He nodded. She said she gave you everything. She did. He closed his eyes. I deserved that. Yes. I never wanted to put her in the middle. You did more than that. You forced your daughter to carry your secret for 3 years. Tears filled his eyes. I know. No. You don't. I reached into my bag and placed the jewelry receipt on the table. His expression changed instantly. You found that. I did. You were going to marry her. He looked at the receipt for a long time. Then he quietly admitted. I asked her to marry me, even though I already knew. Hearing it aloud felt like being stabbed. You accepted 2 engagements at the same time. He covered his face. I never planned to go through with it. I frowned. What? It was the only way to keep her from leaving. I stared at him. So you proposed. To stop your mistress from breaking up with you? He nodded weakly. My stomach turned. Claire thought she was building a future. I thought I already had one. He'd been lying to both of us. I stood up. The conversation was over. Emily. I didn't answer. Please. I looked back one last time. I hope one day you understand exactly what you've destroyed. Then I walked away. He didn't follow me. 3 days later, my lawyer called. We've reviewed the financial records. What did you find? There was a pause. A few things concern me. My heart sank. What things? Over the last 4 years, your husband transferred a significant amount of money into another account. How much? She told me the number. I nearly dropped the phone. It wasn't thousands. It was well into 6 figures. Money we'd earned together. Money we'd saved for retirement. Gone. The lawyer continued. We also found mortgage payments. I don't understand. They're not for your home. I froze. He bought another house. A week later, my attorney obtained the property records. Daniel had purchased a small 3-bedroom house 18 months earlier. The owner listed on the deed wasn't just him. It was him. And Claire. Together. He wasn't simply planning another marriage. He'd already built another home. When I showed Lily the documents, she covered her mouth in shock. I had no idea. Neither did I. We both sat in silence. Finally, she whispered. How could someone keep this many lies straight? I looked out the window. I think after enough years, they stopped feeling like lies. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Hello. A woman's voice replied. Emily? Yes. My name is Claire. My heart stopped. There was a long silence before she spoke again. I think. There are some things you deserve to know. I stared at my phone, unable to speak. The woman who had helped destroy my marriage was calling me. Emily, she asked again, her voice trembling. I'm here. I know you probably hate me. I closed my eyes. I don't even know you. There was a long silence. I didn't call to defend myself, she finally said. I called because Daniel lied to both of us. I frowned. What do you mean? He told me he had filed for divorce. My grip tightened around the phone. He said you two were only living together because of financial reasons. He promised the paperwork was almost finished. I laughed bitterly. There were no divorce papers. I know that now. You didn't know he was still my husband? I knew you were legally married, she admitted. But he made it sound like the marriage had been over for years. I couldn't decide whether to believe her. Then she said something that made my heart sink. I found out the truth the same day you did. Claire asked if we could meet. Every instinct told me to refuse. But I needed answers. The next afternoon, we met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. She looked nothing like I had imagined. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't 25. She looked tired. Heartbroken. Almost embarrassed. She placed a folder on the table. I brought everything. I looked at her. What is it? Our messages. Bank transfers. Photos. Even the engagement ring receipt. You can have it. I slowly opened the folder. There were hundreds of pages. 5 years of conversations. 5 years of promises. One message caught my attention. Daniel, as soon as the house sells, I'll finalize everything. Claire looked at me. The house was never for us. I looked confused. What? He told me your house had already been listed. I shook my head. It never was. She gave a sad smile. I know. Claire folded her hands together. Last week, I confronted him. What happened? I asked why he hadn't moved in. And? He admitted everything. My heart pounded. He said he couldn't leave because a divorce would cost too much. I stared at her. He said losing half his savings terrified him. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not love. Not guilt. Money. He had kept me because divorce was expensive. 17 years together. Reduced to a financial calculation. Claire reached into her purse and placed a small velvet box on the table. I don't want this. Inside was the engagement ring. A beautiful diamond. One I never wanted to see again. I ended it, she said quietly. The day I learned the truth. You left him. She nodded. I realized if someone can lie to his wife for 5 years. She paused. He can lie to me just as easily. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something unexpected. Not friendship. Not forgiveness. Just understanding. We had both believed different versions of the same man. 2 weeks later, Daniel asked to meet one last time before the divorce hearing. This time, I chose the location. Our house. The place where every lie had begun. He walked inside slowly. His eyes wandered across the living room. It still feels like home. I looked at him calmly. It stopped feeling like home the day I learned the truth. He nodded. I deserve that. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he asked, Did Claire talk to you? She did. He lowered his head. It's over. I know. I lost her too. I looked at him without emotion. You didn't lose us. You threw us away. His eyes filled with tears. I wish I could take it all back. So do I. He looked hopeful for a split second. Then I finished my sentence. I wish I had known 5 years ago. His expression collapsed. I need to ask you one question, I said. He nodded. If Lily had never brought me that box, would you have ever told me? The room fell silent. He looked at the floor. 30 seconds passed. Then 1 minute. Finally, he whispered. I don't know. That was the only answer I needed. As he reached the front door, he turned around. I did love you. I met his eyes one last time. Maybe you did. But real love doesn't ask someone to live inside a lie. He opened the door without another word. That was the last time I ever saw him. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. He walked away with far less than he expected. But losing money wasn't his biggest loss. He lost his wife. He lost Claire. And for a long time, he even lost the trust of his own daughter. Sometimes the hardest consequence isn't what the court takes away. It's what your choices take away forever. People always ask me the same question when they hear my story. What happened after the divorce? Some expect me to tell them Daniel begged for another chance. Others assume Claire and I became close friends. And a few believe that once the divorce papers were signed, all the pain simply disappeared. Life doesn't work that way. The judge can end a marriage in a matter of minutes. But healing from betrayal takes much longer. Some wounds don't disappear overnight. They fade little by little until one day you realize they no longer control your life. The first month after the divorce was the loneliest season I'd ever experienced. For 17 years, my routine had been built around another person. Every morning I made 2 cups of coffee without thinking. Every Friday I automatically bought Daniel's favorite cereal at the grocery store. One afternoon, I caught myself reaching for his favorite brand of shaving cream while shopping. I stood there staring at it for several seconds before quietly putting it back on the shelf. It was such a small moment, but it reminded me that healing wasn't only about letting go of a person. It was about letting go of thousands of habits built over nearly 2 decades. The hardest part wasn't missing Daniel. It was missing the life I believed we had. There were nights when I questioned everything. Was any of it real? Did he ever truly love me? Were all those anniversaries fake? The more I thought about it, the more exhausted I became. Finally, my therapist said something that completely changed the way I looked at the past. Not every happy memory becomes a lie just because the ending was painful. Those words stayed with me. Yes, Daniel betrayed me. Yes, he lied for years. But there had also been genuine moments. The day we adopted our golden retriever. The weekend we painted the living room together. The nights we laughed until 2 in the morning over old family stories. Those moments belong to me too. I refused to let his betrayal steal every good memory I'd ever had. Lily became the biggest blessing I never expected. She called almost every weekend. Sometimes she'd ask me to help decorate her apartment. Other times she'd simply show up with takeout and insist we watch terrible romantic comedies. One evening, while we were cleaning the kitchen after dinner, she suddenly stopped washing the dishes. "I need to ask you something." I looked at her. "Anything." She took a deep breath. "Do you still think of me as your daughter?" I didn't answer immediately because I was already crying. I walked across the room and hugged her as tightly as I could. "You stopped being my stepdaughter years ago. You've been my daughter ever since." She buried her face in my shoulder and cried harder than I'd ever seen before. "I was so afraid I'd lose you too." "You won't. You never will." That night reminded me that families aren't only built through blood. Sometimes they're built through love, loyalty, and the choice to stay. Daniel had broken our marriage. But he couldn't break the bond Lily and I had built over 17 years. About 6 months later, Claire wrote me one final letter. There was no return address. Just my name written neatly across the envelope. I wasn't sure whether to open it. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Instead, I sat by the living room window and began reading. She apologized again, not because she expected forgiveness, but because she wanted to accept responsibility for believing Daniel's version of the truth. She admitted there had been moments when her instincts told her something wasn't right. She ignored those feelings because she wanted to believe the man she loved. "I wasn't innocent," she wrote. "I chose the easier story instead of asking harder questions." At the end of the letter, she shared one sentence that I still think about today. "A lie doesn't only betray the people who hear it. It also destroys the person who tells it." I folded the letter and placed it inside a drawer with the divorce papers. Not because I wanted to remember the pain. Because I wanted to remember what dishonesty eventually costs. Nearly a year after everything happened, Lily invited me to dinner for my birthday. When I arrived, I was surprised to find the house decorated with balloons, candles, and fresh flowers. Several close friends were waiting inside. Rachel smiled the moment she saw me. "You really thought we'd let you spend your birthday alone?" For the first time in a very long time, I laughed without forcing it. After dinner, Lily handed me a small wrapped gift. When I opened it, I found a leather-bound journal. Inside the front cover she'd written, "For every new chapter you haven't written yet." I looked at her, unable to speak. She smiled. "You spent years writing someone else's story. It's time to write your own." I don't think she realized how much those words meant to me. That night, after everyone left, I opened the journal and wrote my first sentence. Today, I finally stopped surviving and started living again. A few months later, I heard through mutual friends that Daniel had moved to another state. Apparently, Claire had never gone back to him. He'd left his job, sold the second house, and was trying to start over somewhere no one knew his past. People asked if I felt satisfied hearing that. Honestly, I didn't. Revenge sounds satisfying in movies. Real life is different. Watching someone suffer doesn't erase your own pain. It doesn't give you back stolen years. It doesn't rebuild broken trust. The greatest victory wasn't seeing Daniel lose everything. It was realizing I no longer cared what happened next. That was the moment I knew I'd finally moved on. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see while I was living through it. The biggest loss wasn't my marriage. It was the version of myself who believed love meant ignoring uncomfortable truths. I used to think trust meant never asking questions. Now I know trust and honesty must exist together. Real love doesn't ask you to doubt your instincts. Real love doesn't survive on half-truths. And real love never forces someone to live inside a lie they didn't choose. If I could speak to the woman I was 5 years ago, I wouldn't tell her how the story ends. I'd simply take her hand and remind her of something she had forgotten. Your value is never determined by someone else's ability to be faithful. When people betray you, they reveal their character, not your worth. Today, my home is quieter than it used to be. There are no late-night phone calls from Daniel. No fake business trips. No excuses. No wondering where someone is or whether they're telling the truth. Just peace. The kind of peace I never realized I was missing. And if you asked me whether I'd rather have the marriage I thought I had or the life I have now, my answer would surprise you. I'd choose honesty every single time. Because a painful truth can eventually heal. A comfortable lie never does. That is the lesson my husband spent 5 years trying to hide from me. Ironically, it was his own daughter who finally gave it back.